wonder where the heartache falls. Time to stop at the table, sit and stars like dust, dust like stars. I wonder where the heartache falls. Time to stop at the table, sit and drink with Cain and Abel, to see if we could make a pact and agree on some general facts. Deserts are all spreading out. I've seen rivers that have begun to drown. Miles and miles of heated seas, no hospitality. The earth is waiting for you. The earth is waiting for you to bow. The earth is waiting for you. The earth is waiting for you to bow. People under every rock, factories that never stop, greed and hunger and despair, cities lost in yellow air, canyons deep and mountains grow, diamond mines lost in endless snow. Hillsides full of misplaced treasure, rules we can't seem to remember, words get lost on the telephone, wilderness without a home. Holy mountain, holy sea, holy infant we hold tenderly. Go down, Moses, go down slow. 100 years in the desert with no place to go. The earth is waiting for you. The earth is waiting for you to bow. Is waiting for you. The earth is waiting for you to bow. Stars like dust, dust like stars. I wonder where the heartache falls. Time to stop at the table, sit and drink with Cain and Abel, to see if we could make a pact and agree on some general facts.
Okay, everyone, that was a song from Jason's new album, Songs of Love and Grief, out on all streaming platforms now. So, hello, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful winter season. On behalf of the Foundation Nonduality, we welcome you to our third Nondual Roundtable discussion, where we, a panel of Jason Schulman's senior students and teachers, discuss the interface between ideas about non-duality and our daily lives. We're excited to be here with you. So, as you may or may not know, the Foundation for Non-Duality is dedicated to making the principles of non-dual thinking and practice, as articulated by Jason Schulman, available to the greater public for the purpose of transforming the consciousness of individuals in order to help alleviate suffering in the world. These principles and their practical application focus on the unitive connection between personal and transcendent consciousness as the foundational basis for change and healing. Jason Schulman sees the study of non-duality, especially in its practical applications in everyday living, as part of the healing of the human soul. The aim is to live our lives as both healing and healthy individuals who are aware of and connect to the entire web of being, including the totality of who we are. Living the totality of our being means including all of our human parts in our awareness, from our great courage and longing to connect to our many imperfections that work against these aims. Jason Schulman's teachings are based on kindness towards the self and others, and the work of the foundation is to actualize this kindness in everyday life. If you don't know Jason Schulman, over the past 40 years of teaching, he has worked to reconcile the deistic or relative paths of liberation with the consciousness of Buddhism and other non-theistic paths to create a truly non-dual path of healing, one that does not exclude any aspect of reality. His work emphasizes the healing of the personal ego and its rightful place in any path that seeks liberation from ignorance and the awakening of compassion. It also seeks to bring the human world, with its imperfections, into alignment with the realization of transcendent awareness. In this way, we develop a conscious awakening to the sacredness of every sentient being and every time-bound moment. Okay, and now, before we dive into the conversation, I'm going to lead us through a short meditation. So why don't you sit back and make yourself comfortable. Your feet should be flat on the floor, and you don't have to be sitting erect. You can be leaning. And close your eyes for a moment, and I'll take you through this meditation. It's called Inviting Everything In. Begin just by being with your breathing. Be with your breath as it is. Don't get caught up in thinking your breath should be deeper or more regular, or more even or better in some way. Your breathing, just as it is what's keeping you alive, and that is sufficient. So just be with your breathing for a moment. So your intention in this meditation is to invite everything in. Begin with the sounds that are around you right now. Maybe you hear the sounds of other people talking in the background, maybe a car horn or a siren, maybe the wind or a bird. Invite all of those sounds in. We want them to be with you. We want them to be here. Now, invite all of the parts of yourself to be with you right now. The small, frightened parts, the courageous parts, the lazy parts, the devoted parts. Actually say to yourself in your mind, you the one who forgets to be kind to yourself. Be here with me. Come in. You, the selfish one. Be here. You, the one who is argumentative. Be here. You, the one who remembers God from time to time. Be here too. You, the one who forgets God from time to time. Be here as well. Invite all the parts of yourself and all the parts of your environment to be present right now in this moment. Whatever comes into your heart or mind, whether it is a difficulty or whether it is a great insight, it doesn't matter. They are all treated equally. Invite them in. Let's be with all of this for a few moments. Okay, and you can come on back to regular consciousness. And we're back. So, this is our third opportunity to have a conversation about our spiritual lives. And what we want to do here today is invite conversation. There will be time for audience interaction, and we'd love for you to participate with questions and comments. In this third conversation, we've titled it, What is a Spiritual Path? And it is based on Jason's essay, First Light, which can be found in the book Beyond the Now. I'm joined by Beth Almarini, Alice Forrester, and Damon Farnham. My name is Tim Rothschild, and I will be moderating today's conversation. In the essay First Light, Jason writes about being called to a spiritual path, and he breaks it down into 3 stages, which we will touch on today. To open, I'm curious, what drew each of you to a spiritual path in the first place? Let's start there. Any one of you.
Who wants to pick it up?
Oh, Beth, you're muted.
You're still muted.
Sorry. Okay, so I'll start. I think I was not so much drawn to the spiritual path as shoved onto it. It was an escape for me in the beginning. My family was a little crazy and really difficult. And I heard the call, if you will, but I knew that there was something better. There had to be some better way to be than the life that I had been living. So that's what got me started.
I have a question, Beth. So when you say you heard the call, what does that mean to you?
Well, it's like a deep kind of a sense of knowing, it's a very deep, something inside, just a sense of knowing that there is more. There's more than the life that you live every day. There's something else. And sorry, I can't be more specific because it is kind of a almost nebulous sort of thing, at least for me.
So it sounds like what got you into the spiritual path is a little different than what kept you there. Would you say that's true?
Yes. Oh, yes. What a great insight. Yes, that is definitely the case. Because what could start out as, an escape or a fleeing from something ended up to be more about this this pull, this sense that there's more. There's so much depth in life that I was missing, and just being on a path of spiritual seeking was it just gave a sort of contentment and just the desire to look for more.
How about you, Damon or Alice? What drew you to a spiritual path?
I'll speak up and I really resonate with what Beth's saying. And probably for a lot of us, childhood is not always easy. But I think this passage is so much in it and it's so rich. But as I've sat with it over the months and we've had our discussions, I have a resistance to spiritual path, to calling. That's for somebody else. That's some rarefied place. But now I really understand. Yes, I was called. I had a longing. I, like Beth, sat at the dining room table with my family as a young child and going, I had a sense in my body, there's more than this. Mm-hmm. And I did a lot to escape and to experiment. And books were a refuge. And I was mulling it over last night briefly, and just Damon spoke earlier, we were together about, going back into childhood. Before I was 20, I was in Mexico trying to follow Carlos Castaneda and Don Juan's path. I was doing all these crazy things. And I think as a parent and grandmother now, what was going on in my family? But I think just to maybe summarize, the meditation really summarizes it for me too. My path is now I can really so much more accept who I am in all my parts, and I'm grateful to be here, and the comfort in that, which comes and goes, is a gift.
How about you, Damon?
Yeah. Did you guys lose me for a minute, by the way? My internet kicked out. I think we've got some crazy winds here. No?
No.
Okay. As we were talking about getting ready for this talk, it was great because I really had a chance to reflect back on this question. Like kind of what was it like for me in the early years, and I realized as I thought about it that my mother actually introduced me to a lot of things at a very young age. So my mother was very into like earth-based spirituality. So we would do rituals and we would make little magic bags, and she introduced me to Carlos Castaneda and all these different things, and Findhorn Gardens, if you guys are familiar. And it just was like part of kind of what we did, talking to plants and like relating to plants as, having consciousness. And this was at a really young age. And then simultaneously, I was very sensitive and I had a lot of problems. My parents split up when I was really young. It affected me very deeply. I started going to therapy when I was really little. And I very vividly remember the therapist like having a piece of paper on the wall and us making this list of feelings. And I was like 4 years old, but it was like, to me, it was an introduction to the inner world and like this whole sort of, self-reflective process. And these were the seeds, and everything just kind of grew from there. And I remember things like I would have conversations in like middle school about things that I really had no business having thoughts about, like reincarnation or just, you know, what happens after life, and things like talk about it like, you know, I had something to say about it. So I think really it was just a natural part of my early upbringing. And then being raised Jewish, I would go to synagogue. And then I started to have this impulse towards looking around me and seeing what everybody was doing. And then like kind of asking the question of like, how authentic is this? Like, we're praying to God, we're doing these rituals. Like, is this real? Are people connected? Like, is this real for people? And I had this desire to, like, whatever it was that we were doing, I wanted it to be authentic. And so I think that was kind of like the step in towards now seeking, you know, looking into all kinds of different aspects of spirituality. Like everything that I could find, trying to find like what was real, what was authentic, what connected with me. And then, you know, similar but different to what I think some other people are saying too, what really sort of brought this home for me in terms of really committing to my spiritual path was I realized that a lot of the things that I wanted in life, I wasn't able to experience. So I wanted partnership. And I found that I would get into relationships with people, and inevitably, at a certain point, you know, this was in my late teens, my inner experience would end up being very similar over and over and over and over again, and it had nothing to do with who I was with. So instead of thinking that it was like a problem with the person, I realized that the common denominator was my inner world, and that really what I needed to do was make a commitment to start to understand my inner world and, you know, kind of go on this healing journey. And that was it. That was kind of like the beginning, you know, and then from there, it's taken me through, you know, the rest of my life up till now.
So what keeps you on the path?
Well, we'll probably talk about the different stages, right, as we go. So what now at this point in my life,
Right.
what keeps me on the path is it's who I am. So I feel like it's literally like who I am. It's what I'm made of. So I just couldn't imagine life any other way. Earlier in life, it was really about suffering. You know, it was about how hard my personal inner experience was, and just wanting to find some kind of happiness, some kind of alleviation to my suffering, some kind of understanding about what was going on in my heart and my mind. You know, and that in the early years, that was what really, you know, kind of kept me driving forward with it, if you will.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a common denominator for all three of you right now, where it's sort of suffering, some form of suffering. You became awake to it in some way or another, and you had to find something that would help whether that was insight, revelation, understanding something about yourself. That sounds like it was all a part of the path for you guys, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
You know,
Definitely.
I'll share a little bit about my path. You know, for me, I kind of stumbled into spirituality. It was completely by accident. I was maybe 27 years old. I was working at a solar company selling solar installations, and there was a guy next to me who introduced me to alternative ways of thinking about the history of the world. So it rubbed me the right way, and I started to explore. I just started to explore the truth. You know, why are we here? What's going on? And eventually, it led me to realize that I needed to cleanse my doors of perception. So I thought, all right, if I'm really going to understand the truth of what's going on here in life, I'm going to need to be able to heal and understand myself. So I found myself joining healing schools with the sole purpose to sort of understand the truth of why we were here. And it didn't take too long before I realized that there was so much compassion on the spiritual path that that's what kept me there. And that's why I stayed there for so long. It was the compassion. Yeah.
For me, there's, a survival aspect. I've had some severe, or we've all had it, but my personal traumas and, horrible divorce, losing a child. It seems like there's a list, and it saved my life. And I felt like, I'd hit rock bottom, or, the baseball bat would hit me across the head, and I didn't know where to go. And eventually, um, the wanting it to stop. I lived in a world of seeking, and maybe there's a place where there's peace, maybe it's over. I remember having those moments and turning around, and something else would happen. And I actually stumbled into a person doing body work who connected me to the Society of Souls and Jason Schulman. But, a lot of my life I was alone. I have to figure this out on my own, and it's a burden. So as I, this calling, this longing, this knowing inside there's something more, and trusting it, I also began to open up to others. There were some therapists, and the non-dual aspect, which is a confusing term, is really, being part of a community and knowing it, and asking for help from that community. So I just the path actually brought me, in a way, you're not really going anywhere. It's like, it's the meditation, I'm here, and as I am, I'm enough. And it's so simple sounding, but the journey to get there is a lot of work and courage, and strength and fear and wonder. So I'll say survival. I've had some really, really low points that it was like, why is this happening to me, and why am I here, and why do I want to be alive? That kind of place. So I'm grateful.
I think I love, Tim, that you brought up the concept of compassion, and how important that is when you get to a point you realize how, even with all the awful things, the world is made of compassion, and when you're on that spiritual path, you find that more and more. And it's not just that you have it for yourself, you have it for others, and that's the other thing too. I have that idea of community, the idea that you don't have to be alone in whatever's going on, and you don't even have to be alone on this path. That there's other people involved, in that compassion that you give out comes right back to you. And I think that's one of the things that keeps me there. Just like the meditation, letting everything in. There's just so many parts of myself that I wanted nothing to do with and had no compassion for, until going on this journey. And it really does bring you to that place.
Yeah. And I want to add in that, what I'm hearing all of us say, is start to what we can get from being on the path, but that, this seems to be a really common denominator, is that we all want to be okay. We all want to be happy. We all feel like something should be possible for us, some experience of life, and it's not what we're experiencing. And, you can call it suffering. You can, in this chapter, I think Jason also calls it like the noise of life, imperfect upbringing, childhood pain, misconceptions, human limitations, fears, all of these things that kind of, block our experience of our true nature. And I'm paraphrasing, literally, I'm reading from the book and paraphrasing it as I'm talking, but it's this really kind of difficult experience of life. Alice, you mentioned divorce. I personally, and I know a lot of people who, at some point, we manage our emotions, and then, our anxiety or our fears or our limitations become loud enough that we feel like we need to do something about it. And, and we feel like we can, like we feel like something's possible. And this seems to be kind of that first step that Jason talks about, that brings us into the spiritual path, is that we want to kind of alleviate suffering. We want to try to be okay and happy.
Right.
And that is where it begins, I think, for a lot of people.
Let's go ahead and name it, right? That's the first stage of being called to a spiritual path that Jason writes about. To summarize again, we're surrounded by the noise of our history, and we can't hear the calling to be real, to be our authentic self, because we're also often we're defending territory. We're hiding who we really are. We're people pleasing. We're doing whatever we need to do to be happy and survive. But our idea of happiness and survival, to the unhealed ego at least, is pretty screwed up. And we'll hang in some pretty messed up situations, and we'll stay there because happiness means not changing anything. So it seems to me that the first call to a spiritual path is when part of that moment when we realize that our life just isn't working the way it is anymore, and something needs to change. And there's sort of a pressure to move forward, and we may not know what that is, but that's a part of what we're talking about today, isn't it?
Yes.
All right.
I like that, what you said, Tim, and everybody's saying, but yeah, I think for me, I could kind of function, and it got to be in my 30s with children and a very difficult marriage, and I just couldn't do it anymore. I mean, and the noise, that first stage, I was reacting, I was coping, I was struggling, I was denying, I was crying. It was there was some joy in there. I'm not trying to paint total gloom, but there's just it just doesn't work. But taking that inventory, starting therapy, realizing, like Tim said, there's a common denominator here. It's me, failed relationships, all these different cyclical patterns. And then, I often use the metaphor stepping off the cliff. I've just feel like I had to step off the cliff a lot. I had to change divorce lawyers. One was ripping me off, and every lawyer in town's like, we're not going to touch you. You have a lawyer. All these places. So as I began to step off the cliff more and more, it's taking the step forward. Back then it was the cliff, and I would be caught. I found so much grace in trusting over time. So the first stage, really did bring me finally to realizing I had some choice, and I was supported. I am supported. And I had less hatred for those parts of myself I didn't like. But it was a noisy world. And my home, and just something came up to me last night, my childhood home, for some reason, everyone yelled and screamed. It was just very loud, literally, when I saw that word noise. I went to college, and I went early. I wanted to get out of the house. I was 16, I went for a year. And the silence, the quiet, what an awareness. I just thought the whole world was yelling and screaming and chaos. So anyways, there's so many insights that have come up from this work. Thank you for sharing.
Alice, as you're saying that, it's making me, think that in that quiet, that silence that you hadn't had a chance to experience as much, I imagine that you started to come in contact with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Which is really what we're...
Yeah. And curiously, my first year of college, I did a Buddhism study. Later in college, I studied Islam and Sufism. And so I was doing that kind of seeking too. But yeah, I think that quiet was really an astounding realization. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the things, right? That like sometimes if we stay busy enough, we don't have to like quite come in contact with our suffering. We're never, it's like we just kind of keep the engines revved to the point where we keep kind of like bouncing off the top of it. And, you know, we may never, you know, I'm sure for a lot of people, they go through their life and, you know, they never come in contact long enough to feel like, you know, I really want to do something about this. You know, I want to try to have a different relationship with my life.
That sounds like a good start to the second stage of being called as well. You know, it's sort of, we start to move out of the noise of our history and we start to have a little bit more of a sense of ourself, you know, kind of like who we really are, what our preferences are, the kind of people we like to hang out with. And usually those people obviously have, you know, some sort of spiritual inclination as well, because we start to become attracted to what we're cultivating in ourselves. And that's a certain kind of attitude of kindness that allows all of ourselves to be here and have a place, even though we may not quite know how it's going to play out, or it might feel a little dangerous to show this part of ourselves, but we start to do it anyway. And can somebody speak a little bit more to the second stage of how we move through it?
I mean, I can start it with a little bit of a quote here, if that's okay. You know, just kind of reading from this chapter from Jason. You know, more and more we find ourselves with people of like mind and thought. This is just what you were saying, Tim. We seek out situations that will challenge us and teach us. We feel increasingly glad to learn. And then when that openness is settled into our bodies and minds, we begin to trust it. We realize that this call to our soul is actually happening all the time. So it's almost like we start to sort of settle in a little bit. So we're not just in survival mode. We're not just in, you know, I just want to be okay. I just want to be okay. I want to take care of the suffering. It's like we start to like relax a little bit and settle in a little bit, and like we start to have ourself more. And then as we have ourself, it's like we start to be in the world with it. It's almost like we get to try it on. Okay, so now that I feel a little bit more comfortable in myself, I'm going to interact with my friends. How does it feel, you know, as an expression of me? How does that sit in me? Does that nourish me? Does that take me away from myself? It's like we get to continue to kind of, you know, have this experience and learn more and hopefully relax into it more. And find like some joy and some pleasure and a little bit of exploration and play, and not just, you know, kind of the work of it. So that, I think that's kind of like that second stage starts to be a bit more like kind of living feeling to me.
I really like how you talk about exploration and play, because I grew up in a very traditional religious background, and you know, there was one way to do things, and that was that. There was no room for exploration or play or any of that. So getting to that point of being comfortable enough to be able to do that, to look a little further afield, that maybe this isn't the only way, was very liberating. And getting to that was when I think I started most of my seeking, looking at other religions, other ways of spirituality, and I think that's, well, it's kind of crucial, right? Because you're not going to be able to find, as for me, wasn't able to find what I was looking for in the narrow path that I had been born into, and being able to look around, to be more open, was really important.
So this,
Okay.
sorry, Alice, you go.
Just briefly say I love what both of you said, and I guess there's a little sentence in here that really resonated with me. This stage is a lot of work. And Jason writes, it takes it takes long and sometimes arduous work to have the faith to continue our journey. And I guess for me, yes, I'm enough as I am, and all those statements, which none of you have said, but it also took a lot of work. And we meet with our own and the world's resistance to change and happiness, even as we all claim to want nothing but happiness. And that's something I continue to work with, is my resistance to happiness. And what an irony, I've done all this because I want to be better and happier, and I still have resistance. Do I deserve it? And as Beth said, opening the narrow pathway that I thought was the way to be has really helped, and compassion for myself. And I definitely have more play and happiness and freedom because of all this. So I just want to say that.
You're reminding me, there was a point in my second stage where I was exploring so much. I realized I came to a point where it was like I had two lives. One was my spiritual life and all of these wonderful explorations. And then there was this other life that didn't seem to fit with it anymore. I remember it was the first time in my life that I started to pray. I didn't know what to do. I had these two different lives. It's like, how do these go together? And so I started to pray, and I guess based on my constitution or my subconscious, whatever it was, ended up having a lot of dreams that were really helpful. And eventually it led me to other people that became even more helpful, different teachers, different healers that I'd speak to, different therapists. I realized in the second stage, I needed a lot of help to help integrate this new sense of my being. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, at least for me, if it weren't for all those people to help, I don't know. I'd be stuck somewhere, right? Stuck in kind of doing the same thing over and over again, looking for happiness and wondering why I couldn't find it. And I think that, the spiritual path is really not one you can take alone. And you can do it, you can get so far. But to really progress, to really make a difference, to really find a new way, you have to have other people. It just doesn't seem to work as well by yourself.
I would say absolutely. I mean, I think I was going to say every day, almost every day, I have interactions with people where just being in their presence as they share or express something, I'm like, it reminds me of something in myself. That, it touches something, it lights up something in me that would not have gotten lit up, unless I was with this other person who is also on the path. So sometimes it's that, sometimes, it's a reflection. Sometimes I get lost and I forget, or I'm in some piece of history or darkness or difficulty. And it's like, I need to be able to interact with a companion for help to sort through that, and to sort of find myself. So I totally, in so many ways, I think that this is the beauty for me of how a lot of it happens.
On the spiritual path, we talk about returning to the marketplace a lot. So we go off, we do our studies, we all have this image of the yogi in the mountains in a cave, realizing themselves. And then the tricky part is, once we're done with that work, going back into life, going back into the marketplace and encountering ourselves through other people. So somebody treats us a particular way, we have a reaction. Somebody else treats us a certain way, we have a reaction to that, and we gain insight. We see where we're still caught in certain areas of our lives, but it's that interaction It's the interacting with life and with other people that's so important. And I just want to bring this back in, the kindness that's necessary, because each part of ourself that becomes, the light gets shined on it. What do we do with this now? Well, we have to love it. We have to give it a place. Right? If we don't do that, then we're exiling parts of ourselves, and we're chopping ourselves into different kinds of pieces and judging what's allowed and what's not allowed. And, on the non-dual path, everything in a certain sense is allowed when we have this attitude of kindness. So that's what it made me think about.
Well, and that's what's beautiful about this path, I think. Like, how can you seek wholeness or find it if you're busy chopping off parts of yourself that you don't like, and exiling them? Then you just, that doesn't really lend itself to wholeness. But welcoming everything in and being tender and kind towards it is what is going to bring you closer to the wholeness that you're looking for.
I'll add, I agree with you, and I always put in there when I can, when I remember, because I do forget. And sitting here and sitting in with fellow travelers and classmates or whatever, it's easy. It's very nourishing. But to step out into the world, and there's always challenges. My historical habitual ways were to be a perfectionist, straight A student, get it right, fix it, which was a delusion, but that's sort of how I maintained or thought I could survive. And I think my spiritual calling, this path, the school has allowed me to really relax and allow all the parts of myself in more. And I have to laugh because I was in some grad school not too long ago, and it's like, maybe I can just get a C, or I'm around people and I'm thinking, wow, I think they don't like me, and that's really good, because I had this delusion that, of course people are going to like me. I'm going to make sure they're going to like me. So all that negotiating, there's so much work in negotiating and trying to maintain, and that there's a surrender, there's an allowing. I think he talks about efforting and allowing go together. We do try, we do, make choices and preferences and study. And then we also, I think, the permission to just surrender. It's not all up to me. And with companions and friends, and having a choice of who those people are too, because I think I always felt very loyal to friends that perhaps weren't friends. I didn't have that intimacy. So anyways, it's a joy, and still a struggle, but they're more interwoven. Like Tim said, I don't feel like I'm this person here and this person here as much anymore.
And that's a healing, isn't it? I'm surprised we haven't talked about healing and awakening, right? Because so much of a spiritual path, for me at least, has been a healing path. If I could simplify, to me, healing means, can I tolerate what's here? Sort of what's showing up in my life right now. Can I actually bear it? Can I be with it as it is? And then the awakening part is sort of like recognizing some aspect of myself that I may have been leaving out, unconsciously, and it's a continual process of healing and awakening, being able to tolerate what's here and be awake to what's here and give it a place. And then really from there's like this other thing that happens where life shows up in a different way as well. When we're showing up this way, there's this other thing. And I think, Alice, this is part of what you were talking about, where, Jason always writes about the personal and the impersonal. When we can let ourselves be as we are, the impersonal nature of life starts to come in and support us as well. And I think that's a good segue into the third stage that we can talk about, which Jason mentions is, it's sort of like a truer expression of non-duality, a choiceless choice that we have to continue being ourselves. What do you think about that?
the first thing I'll say about it is sometimes it can be tricky to talk about, right? That's the cliche, is that sometimes we talk about it like it's a thing. You know, we describe it, we point to it, we have conversations about it, and it's this thing out there. What's a little trickier is, for me, you know, it happens a lot of different ways, but sort of to, you know, it can whatever, spontaneously, or sometimes just to slow down enough that I actually come in contact with the life, like you're saying, Tim, as it is in the moment. And it's like, from this place, what I start to realize is that everything that we've been talking about so far, you know, it's kind of like the healing self. So I'm knowing myself in the world more. I know my history. I know my, you know, my belief systems, my preferences, the things, my suffering. So it's like my selfness is a lot more healed and awakening. And then what happens is, for me, and I think this is what this stage kind of talks about, is that this other thing starts to happen where we start to realize that, you know, not only am I a very autonomous self, but that I am also 100% part of the interconnected web of life. That it's like, that it's me personal, and that I am part of this greater interconnected oneness. And that it doesn't become just an idea, but it actually becomes like this bodily consciousness experience that we have more. And then as we have it, you know, there's a lot of different, not that I want to go on about it, but there's implications to it. Like everything that makes me up is the same stuff that makes up everybody else. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden, you know, my longing, even my calling, which I think Jason talks a lot about in this, is like, it's not just personal to me. It's like spread throughout everything and everybody else. So it's like everybody else is, you know, exactly that same sort of personal expression of existence, just like I am. Mm-hmm. And this becomes more of the reality, and not just like an idea that we talk about and a thing. And I think that the returning to this is kind of like, this is, I think, a lot of the gift of Jason's work, is that I think that the returning to this experience is the real wholeness, is the real non-duality. It's not escapism. It's not escape into spirituality. It's not some sort of homogenized oneness. It's like, I am a completely separate being, and man, I am part of this infinitely connected world. Isn't that amazing? You know, and it comes and goes, right? But this is, I think, what this sort of third stage that we talk about starts to be.
And it changes everything, doesn't it? When you realize that you are here and exactly as you are, longing, and that everybody else is the same way, then it's not just being nice to people because that's a polite way to be. It's because, you know, you can't act any other way. When you realize that everyone is, you know, an expression of God, if you want to use that term, or reality, whatever, you can't help but treat them with love and kindness. So that for me is kind of how it changes everything, and how you live. And I do just want to say, I know it's been said a few times, but I really have to emphasize the idea that, you know, we go through these stages and it's like just a nice, you know, trajectory. We weave back and forth, right? You know, you'll have this amazing experience of oneness and all of that, and connection with everything. And then, you know, somebody will cut you off in the, you know, on the road, and you're kind of back to But it's not even just those simple things, but we just, I think it's our nature to kind of go back and forth. And I think it's important to really realize that,
It's a part of the rhythm of life to forget and to remember.
Yes, I love the way you put that.
Yeah. And for me, at least, that's what I love about the spiritual path, is it gave me this trust in life, to know that I'm a separate being, but I'm still connected to this much larger web of being. And there's a particular rhythm where I'm contracting, I'm expanding, I'm forgetting, I'm remembering. It helps me locate myself right where I am. And when I'm located, I feel supported. And it enables me to feel the love or give myself the compassion, or others the compassion that I want. And actually, you know what? We got some questions from the audience. Why don't we dive into that real quick? The question is, it seems like a lot of what you're all talking about starts with the idea of giving yourself permission. So the question is, what's the most important thing you've struggled to give yourself permission to do?
Just to be myself, to allow myself to be exactly who I am, has been the most difficult thing to give myself permission for. Because I think a lot of us grow up and think, well, you should be some other way, right? You shouldn't be so sensitive to things. You should be this way or that way or whatever other way. Constantly getting the message that who you are and how you are is somehow not enough. So to be able to give myself permission and to let myself believe that exactly who I am and exactly how I am is a sacred and holy thing has been the most difficult and also the most healing.
I will second that. And for me, no doubt, the hardest thing was allowing myself to be as I am. I came from a football background. I played a lot of American football. I was very identified with being this, big, strong man who had to be a particular way. And when I started to go on the spiritual path, I got in touch with different aspects of myself, and it was like, I just, that older version of myself, it just can't stand up to this urge that I have to be more real. So the masks that I was wearing were the hardest things to let go of, no doubt.
Absolutely. And go ahead, Alice. I'll just say that, like I said, I third, you seconded, I third. It's just to be exactly as I am, and still, like, every day I find new levels of this. I find, like, every day, or not every day, but probably every other day, I find a new level of that balance of allowing myself to just be as I am, whatever that experience is. And it doesn't mean that everything that it doesn't mean that I give myself permission to act out, every urge, every thought, every whatever it might be. But to have the inner experience that, like, everything that I have going on inside of me is okay, and there's room for it. And to remind myself of that over and over again. And it's like for me, what I've realized recently is that there's a level of relaxation into myself that has been very hard. And that's been one of the hardest things for me, is like to just be like, it's this exactly as things are in this moment are okay. And it is a relaxing. So I think that's been one of the hardest things for me.
I'll just say briefly, and I concur with you, both of you. I mean, and I think giving myself to be permission to be myself, but I think I would also say giving myself permission to fail and I'm a flawed human being. And I've used the Post-it notes are great, like I'm a human being. I make mistakes. Has been a huge opening for me because my habitual ways were I have to get this right no matter what. And when we're a kid, that's kind of a life and death statement. Yeah. So I think a result of all the work and the journey and the permission. And in Jason writes, we can be as we are, filled with flaws and made of love itself. And I've really learned to love myself full of flaws. And I make mistakes and fall down and get up again all the time, which is a mantra in our school. But that permission has been very hard and still working on it.
So, after talking about this for the last 50 minutes or so, I have a question about, so what is a spiritual path, right? We've been talking about it for 50 minutes. What's the point? Why do we do it? And I'm thinking more about sharing our wisdom to people who are thinking about starting some sort of a path or a practice.
Oh, I would say it's a marvelous adventure. I have never been so excited, fulfilled, sometimes scared. But my gosh, just the way the world has, opened up, and I've opened up to the world. And the room for play and pleasure and enjoyment that I had no idea how much I had, forbidden myself or been, locked into. So I would say, it's challenging. It's an adventure. And it's something that, so often I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know how it's happening. And I love that place of, something's going to happen and I don't know, and trusting. And as Tim said, praying. I had a real anathema to organized religion. I grew up Christian, go to church. My father, we'd all talk about how we're going to be kind to each other. My father would come home and have a temper tantrum. So the hypocrisy. So the idea of prayer, and I think Jason talked about it, is just you're speaking to God or higher power or whatever, whoever, you conceive of as being wholeness. And I do use that a lot. But I just want to say that there's so much fun and pleasure and play that can come out of it too. And we just I never realized how much I was missing,
I think I would say why, what is the point of a spiritual path, or why you would embark on such a thing, is because you can't help but do it, but go on that.
It's inevitable.
In a good way, yes.
I wouldn't. I think that's beautiful, Beth. I wouldn't add a thing.
So let me close by reading a little bit from what Jason wrote here. He says, by being truly who we are, we become undefended. Becoming undefended, we give up the territory. Giving up the territory, we have nothing to reflect upon. With nothing to reflect upon, we become empty of preconception and prejudice and open to all of the ways. Yet being that way, we also see that we are human and can never give up these things entirely. It is then we hear the call, come as you are. He goes on, but I recommend everybody get the book on the Now, read the essays in there. I'm sure we're going to be talking about it some more. And don't forget, the Foundation for Nonduality relies on your donations and it keeps us going. So please, if you feel so inclined, please donate. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And thank you to our wonderful panel here. And we'll see you next month.
Okay.